Well, hello, welcome back to Tale 3 Cabins. It's been 5 years since I first purchased this Polaris 570 midsize UTV, side by side, whatever you want to call them. So I thought I would go over having this for 5 years now. Most of the time these things have very small incremental changes. They don't change much over the years. So if you were to buy one of these today, it would be very similar. There's just a few minor changes. And we'll go over some of the changes compared to this 2020 and now 2026s are going to be coming out pretty soon. Let's just start with a little bit of history. Now, before purchasing the property that we have here now, I used to hunt next door, and we're basically on the same hillside. And if you look in this direction, our property starts out somewhat okay, not too hilly by the road, but then once we get behind the house here, it pretty much goes up and up and up and up and up and up. Now, we've nicknamed our hill the Widowmaker. A lot of good men have perished and succumbed to slipping and falling on this section of our hill. It's very steep. We actually did put a rope up top that helped you ascend a little bit. We attached a rope from a tree to a couple other trees. But this is the rope I was talking about, but we used to use this to climb up this steep section here. And it was also helpful when you wanted to come down. Now, it's nice and dry right now, and it's not an issue getting up this hill. If we should get a little bit of rain and then this becomes a little glazed, usually the first 1 or 2 trips up is fine, but then you kind of loosen up that dirt and then it gets a little precarious trying to come up and down. When it's raining, a lot of times you just slide right down here. Certainly in the wintertime, if you got some ice or snow, many men have fallen and slipped and got snow up their muzzleloader's barrel. When I used to hunt next door, I used to probably just come down here for gun season. We'd get up early in the morning, and the first thing we would have to do is to trudge up this hill. Always ended up being very fatiguing to get up to the top of this hill. Chilly in the morning, you start out sweating. Over the years, I would carry a backpack with me and put all my jackets in the backpack, and literally, even if it was in the 20s out, I would be just hiking up that hill in just a long sleeve t-shirt. Then once I got to the top, I would put on, all my jackets and everything. And that always became a pain. Even still, you'd get a little bit sweaty, and then that makes you just cold the rest of the time. So then after several years of doing that, I ended up buying the property next door. So the one thing that we needed down here was going to be some sort of ATV/UTV, quad runner, side-by-side, something. And initially we started out with a quad runner. I actually bought a Yamaha Kodiak, which is very similar to what a Grizzly is today, a 450, and that used to make it up this Widowmaker no problem. It had 4-wheel drive lock, which is a feature that I like on the Yamahas a lot because it locks all 4 tires, and they just trudged right up this hill time after time after time. Only when it got icy up here that it would have a problem getting up, and I did have to hook the winch up to a couple trees to either get me up to the top of the hill. But for the most part, that Yamaha quad runner did very well for us here. Now, after having that quad runner for a little while, I ended up picking up another one made by Can-Am 650, and that was nice. It had what they call, I believe, a one-up seat, so it's technically a 2-seater. It's one behind the other, and we had that for a number of years. That also worked out fine. It didn't have the 4-wheel lock like the Yamaha did, but it did okay unless it got kind of wet and muddy up here, but it did fine coming up the Widowmaker. It doesn't look terrible from the camera's point of view, but it is a pretty steep incline, either coming up or down. And especially when you're coming down, everything in the UTV shifts. You can't have anything on the seats or on the dash or on the floor. Everything just wants to fall off. So it is a lot steeper than you think it is. Now, after a number of years of having the 2 quad runners, it was working out okay, but it seemed like it would be better off to have something that could carry a little bit more cargo when we're going up the hills, especially when we're setting up tree stands, carrying up corn and feeders and all that stuff. It was getting a little monotonous, and sometimes you had to come up with creative ways to strap something down on one of these quad runners. So after a number of years, my friend Don was down here, and he brought his Razor, which I believe is a 570. I really had my doubts that it was going to make it up the Widowmakers, and sure enough, he brought it down here. We head up on the hill. I think I was following him in my quad runner, and he zipped right up this hill. And I was very surprised how agile it was and how easily it made it up the hill. The conditions were good, the conditions were dry, But that started the wheels turning that maybe I should give up the quad runners and go with something that's more of a utility vehicle. Me and him talked about it for a while, and he suggested a Ranger because of the back bed here. His Razor does not have the cargo carrying capacity in the back like a Ranger has. So I started looking around. I looked at a Kawasaki Mule. I looked at all the equivalent models compared to the Polaris Midsize 570. And the reason I stayed small is, one, for the price, and two, that I wanted to stay somewhat agile going through the forest here. Our paths were pretty much cut out and designed for quad runners. So at the time I felt I didn't want to get a larger Ranger because that would require us to widen up all of our ATV trails. And this pretty much was narrow enough where we didn't have to make any modifications at the time. So I ended up selling both of my quad runners. I sold the Kodiak first and then the Can-Am. With that money, I then decided that I was going to go with the Polaris. Liked the idea of the Polaris better. The Kawasaki Mule was all metal in the back, and I didn't really care for the metal bed because I knew it was going to get all scratched up and nicked up anyways. And I actually wanted to have a sturdier plastic that I think would hold up better with what we're going to be using it for. So this Polaris 570 midsize has the same motor or engine that my friend's Razor had in it. So I knew if his can make it up the hill pretty easily, that there's not going to be much difference when it comes to power compared to that. So in my mind, I felt the 570 was going to do okay coming up these hills. And it has. In 2020, this Ranger was somewhere around $10,000, give or take. So with the money that I got for my quad runners, and I also got another discount for being a first responder, I think I got 10% off, that I paid somewhere just below, actually $9,000. I think $9,000 out the door with tax and everything to get this. So to me, it was economical. It wasn't that expensive to move up. Yes, I do miss my quad runners a little bit. Every now and then it'd be nice just to take a little ride or a little bit more agile going through the woods. In the long run, this has worked out much better than I really anticipated it to, and really enjoy having it. 5 years. It's got 100 hours on it, 500 miles, so I put about 100 miles a year on it. It's really just going up and down this hill several times a year, and every now and then I go out on the back roads here and just take a little ride. I don't really beat the crap out of it. I don't take it on long ATV trail trips. I'm not someone that's going to want to put it and get it up to its axles in mud and get it stuck and unstuck and stuff like that. It's really just to use around our property, make things easier, and really just to haul things up this widowmaker. So right off the bat, compared to having a quad runner, it's so much nicer to just throw a deer in the back here, fill this thing up full of corn, take the feeders. We've even built blinds and hauled portions of blinds with it. It's just, it's nice having that extra cargo area. Now you can squeeze a third person in here, but it's really just built for two people side by side. If you put a third person in there, it's pretty tight. Now right when I got the Ranger, there were a few options that it came with. The camo color was an option. That was a little bit more money. And I think that was it. That was really the only extra. It doesn't have power steering. I get ribbed all the time that I didn't get power steering, and everybody jokes saying it was just a $30 option and I was too cheap to go up for that extra $30. It was much more than that. If you want to go up to power steering nowadays, I think you have to change the whole package of the RV from the base model up to a model that's going to give you windshields and maybe a roof and a winch. And that tacks on another $3,000 to get that power steering included. Over the years and now using it, there are times where it'd be nice to have power steering. A lot of times, especially since I make YouTube videos, I'm trying to hold a camera with one hand, steer and meander through the woods with the other hand, and it's pretty rough. Power steering would make that a little bit easier. There are a lot of times we're in a tight spot up in the woods here and we have to turn around and you're kind of doing your Austin Powers imitation, getting through these woods, and you're just pulling on the wheel one way, pulling on it the other way. It'd be nice to have power steering in that instance also. So if I had to make one change when I ordered this, it would probably be nice to have power steering. Now I do know that you can buy an aftermarket kit for power steering on this, and I still haven't been able to find an answer to this question, but I'm wondering if this aftermarket kit is similar to what would be on the UTV if you ordered it with power steering, or is it something completely different to begin with? If anybody has put an aftermarket kit on their UTV, please leave a comment below and let me know how that worked out for you. Do you know offhand if it's similar to how it would come if you had it built from the factory with power steering or not? I'm still thinking maybe I would get a power steering kit for this in the future, and I might reach out to a couple companies to see if I can get one, but we've been able to make do. It hasn't been that terrible. It's only, you know, when you're in a tight spot up here on the hill. Now, accessories. One of the first things I did when I got this UTV was I started adding things to it. I put a roof on it. I put some LED lights on the back here. I put LED lights on the front on top of the roof. I added a 3,000-pound winch on the front end. I eventually added a little remote control for that winch, which was just done maybe last year. So I've slowly increased things. I put little toggle switches on the inside for all these additions. I put a windshield on the front. I put a windshield on the back with built-in vents. I have not done anything with the stock doors. I did have one of these doors just tear this year, so they've held up pretty well. It would be nice to have maybe a harder side door. There's really not much more you could add to this thing. You could probably put a radio in it, maybe some speakers on top. That's really not necessary here because you wouldn't get any radio reception anyways, or any type of internet with your phone to pair it. Maintenance-wise, it's been pretty easy to take care of. Every now and then I will grease all the little fittings that have to do with the suspension. I think there's 4 grease fittings for every tire when you go around this thing. So every now and then I put grease on that. I've changed the oil a couple times. That's not very difficult, and that's really been about it. I haven't had anything break on it. I didn't have to take it in for any service. So far it's held up well. I am thinking that I might change the tires out one day, maybe just put a little beefier tire on there. They are starting to wear down a little bit, but as I said, there's only about 500 miles on them. Now my friend Nick, he has the Polaris 1000. Got a larger Polaris Ranger. It does fit 3 people in the front seat. It is a little bit wider, and he brings it up here, and it does have a nicer, beefier, deeper sound to it, and it goes up this hill no problem, and it's got that extra power. If it's a matter of pinching pennies, this 570 is going to do pretty much everything you want it to do. If you want to do it a little bit quicker and maybe a little bit more ease going up a very steep hill, well then you'd want to look into the 1000. For the most part, I can't think of any time when this has failed me to do something I wanted it to do. Of course, you got to realize the UTV's limitations. It's not going to be able to do something that like my 3/4 ton truck could do when it comes to pulling and hauling. For here, this is a necessity for us. It's worked out good. I enjoy using it. It's fun to cruise around through here. A little workhorse for us. Other than the power steering, I really can't come up with any other complaints, and that's on me. I didn't get power steering because I was pinching my pennies at the time, and I didn't want to spend too much more for a UTV. This was actually in 2020. It was right at the height of COVID, so the inventories were also starting to get low. Now another change that I see, and I don't know when this took place, but on the 2026, if you were to order one of these, you can no longer get this camo color. It comes in basically a drab or an olive green color, and that is the base model. If you move up to their premium package, this is more of a dark blue color, and there's really no choices. That's it. There's no camo color available anymore, at least not that I could see on the website. Of course, for most people, the camo color is not a big deal. I liked having the option. The camo color kind of goes with the look and the feel of what's happening here, so it just blends in a little bit better. When I park this in the woods, sometimes it is hard to see compared to maybe a bright red one if one of the guys would bring one down, or even a blue one. It's pretty easy to pick out into the woods. But that option appears to be gone, at least on the base model that I can see. I didn't look at too many other models than that. If you are ordered a 2026 now, the lights have changed. I still have halogen headlights here, but they do come with LED lights now, which I've thought about changing, and I just haven't gotten around to it for 2 reasons. Be a little bit brighter, and also they use a little bit less power. Light bar on the top though is primarily what I use when I'm coming out of the woods at night. It just lights everything up, and I usually don't even turn these headlights on. The only time I use the headlights is if we're going to be riding on the road for a little while. I usually use both, and then if I have traffic coming, I'll shut the LED lights off. Now I've only noticed a few differences on the 2026 model that's out. If you currently go on their website, you can spec out or you can build a UTV. The base model is right around $12,000, which I thought at this time, with the way inflation has been and the prices of everything that has gone up, I thought that $12,000 still was not a bad price for a base model of this UTV. When I look back at my tractor that I got, I paid $19,000 for my tractor, and now you cannot get that tractor for under $29,000. So that has gone up over 50%, where this has gone up 20%. Let's say I didn't have this and I was in the market again now to buy UTV for this property, and knowing what I know and everything like that, would I buy this again? And I'm kind of leaning towards no. And the reason I say that is you can go in a lot of like your Tractor Supplies, Lowe's, even there's a farm and family store that just opened up not far from us. And they all have these UTVs sitting out in the parking lot at a price of around $9,000, $8,000 to $9,000. They all have around a 550 motor in there, and they all come stocked pretty well. So everything that I added on here already comes with a lot of these UTVs you see at these stores. And I know that they're a cheaper unknown brand. It comes from China. Really would be taking a serious look at those, because they already come with a winch. They already come with a windshield, with a roof, with LED lights. Some of them are a little bit bigger. The bed's a little nicer. For example, this tailgate here has these little snaps, and they're fine. But if you look at the 2026 Polaris now, it's actually just one little handle here. The UTV that I was just looking at the farm store has a nice tailgate on it. The bed is actually a little bit bigger. The UTV now is a little bit wider that I was looking at. I don't know what the power of that would be compared to this going up that hill, just how that would work out. I have heard from some reviews, and I've watched some YouTube videos on people that bought them, and I believe the brand name that they call the one that I was looking at is Big 50. I'll correct it in the video if I get that wrong. But it looked nice. It looked sharp. And for $9,000 compared to probably having to spend 14 or 15 to get the equivalent in features and accessories on a new Polaris. One thing I did notice is that most of them do not have power steering at the $9,000 level. They do make models that are more expensive that do have it, but those don't. So that would be something I'd have to weigh out. But if I had to do it all over again, I would seriously look at those, seriously consider what my needs are. That might be just fine for this type of property. Maybe if you're someone that's going to be putting 500 miles on your UTV every year, and you go on the Hatfield-McCoy off-road trails, and you go on these jamborees, and you hook it up to your toy hauler, and you take it all over the country, and you're using this thing constantly, well then maybe you would not want to look at one of those. But if you have a piece of property, you need to do some work on that property, haul things around. If you're a deer hunter, that might just be fine. If you're just limited like I am to under 100 miles a year, I seriously would consider looking at it. If anybody out there has purchased one of those, I'd really like to know what your thoughts are, what your experience has been. Just leave a comment below of where you got it, how much it was, and are you happy with it? Okay, so that's my thoughts of having this Polaris Midsize for 5 years now. And that is also going to do it for today. So I appreciate everybody watching. Hope you enjoy and subscribe to these videos. Click on that little bell when you want to know when a new one is coming out. And keep an eye on us. Take care, everybody. But this is the worst part. Now, our neighbor is nice enough to let us use his path when it is pretty messy out and we can't get up the hill. 90% of the time I try to use this during hunting season, of course. During gun season, it usually takes place right after Thanksgiving, so the weather is usually chilly and somewhat inclement. Either some sort of precipitation is coming down that time of November. So many times during gun season, and especially some of the guys with their UTVs that think that this is a little dangerous to go up and down, they'll use the path next door. But it is still long and it is still steep, and it does have a steeper section. It's just a little bit safer because it's straight and there's not a lot of trees involved with their path next door.